morning, Americans. Once again, the race is underway.
Woody Allen made a sci-fi comedy people forgot existed. One of these bankrupted a studio and ended a director's career. And another film star was so high during production, he couldn't remember his own lines. These 11 sci-fi films from the 70s deserved better than being buried and forgotten. Number 11, Damnation Alley. This one was supposed to be the big sci-fi blockbuster of 1977. 21st Century Fox was so confident in Damnation Alley that they buried their other sci-fi release that same year. Some little space opera nobody thought would go anywhere. Yeah, that other movie was Star Wars, and we all know how that turned out. Damnation Alley cost $17 million to make, which was serious money back then. The story follows a group of survivors crossing a post-apocalyptic America in an armored vehicle called the Landmaster. Giant mutant cockroaches, killer storms, the whole 9 yards. The vehicle itself was incredible, a 12-ton beast built from scratch that could actually drive and turn on a dime. The production was a nightmare from day one. Director Jack Smite clashed constantly with the studio. They wanted a popcorn adventure flick. He wanted something darker, closer to the Roger Zelazny novel it was based on. The studio won that fight, and what hit theaters was a watered-down mess that pleased nobody. Jan Michael Vincent and George Peppard led the cast, but even their star power couldn't save it. The special effects that looked cutting-edge during production were already outdated by the time it premiered. Those mutant cockroaches that were supposed to terrify audiences just looked goofy under theater lighting. The movie bombed hard. It made back roughly $5 million domestically, nowhere near enough to justify its budget. Critics tore it apart. Even the cast distanced themselves from it pretty quickly. Vincent later admitted he barely remembered making the film, which tracks considering his well-documented issues during that period. What really killed Damnation Alley wasn't just that it was mediocre. It came out the same year Star Wars redefined what science fiction could be on screen. Suddenly, everything else looked cheap and dated. The studio had bet on the wrong horse, and they knew it. They quietly shelved any plans for a sequel and pretended the whole thing never happened. Today, it's mostly remembered as a cautionary tale about hubris and bad timing. The Landmaster vehicle, though, still shows up at conventions. At least something good survived. Number 10, The Final Program.
Come on, move!
Robert Fuest directed this adaptation of Michael Moorcock's novel, and it's one of the weirdest sci-fi films ever made. The story centers on Jerry Cornelius, a physicist turned adventurer who's hunting for a microfilm hidden inside his family's massive underground bunker. But this isn't a straightforward treasure hunt. It's loaded with bizarre religious imagery, drugged-out sequences, and a plot that jumps around so much it makes your head spin. John Finch plays Cornelius, and he's perfectly cast as this androgynous, morally ambiguous anti-hero who dresses in black and carries himself like a glam rock star. The production design is incredible. All mod furniture and futuristic sets that scream 1970s excess. Fuest, fresh off directing The Abominable Dr. Phibes, brought that same wild visual style to this film. Moorcock himself hated it. He later called it a complete disaster and said the filmmakers completely missed the point of his novel. According to Moorcock, they turned his satirical commentary on modern society into a confusing mess that tried too hard to be hip and ended up being nothing. The film premiered at the Cannes Film Festival in 1973, which should have given it prestige and attention. Instead, it got mauled by critics who had no idea what to make of it. British audiences stayed away. American audiences never even got the chance, since it barely received distribution in the States. The budget was modest, somewhere around £400,000. But even that small investment failed to pay off. It disappeared from theaters quickly and spent decades in obscurity. The few people who did see it either loved its gonzo energy or despised its incoherence. There was no middle ground. Despite all that, The Final Program has developed a small cult following over the years. People who love weird 70s cinema seek it out specifically because it's so bizarre. It's got that experimental vibe that you could only get away with in that decade. Fuest never really recovered from the critical drubbing, though. He made a few more films, but nothing that matched the wild ambition of this one. For better or worse, the final program remains one of the most aggressively strange science fiction films ever made. And that's worth something. Number 9, The Terminal Man.
All right, gentlemen, 17th floor, thank you.
Michael Crichton wrote and directed this adaptation of his own novel, and somehow, it still managed to disappoint everyone involved. The story follows a computer scientist suffering from violent seizures caused by a car accident. Doctors implant electrodes in his brain to control the seizures, but things go sideways when he becomes addicted to the electrical stimulation and starts going on killing sprees. George Segal plays the lead, Harry Benson, and he's genuinely unsettling in the role. The film takes its time building tension, using long, quiet sequences to show Benson's mental deterioration. Crichton wanted to make something thoughtful about technology and human nature. Warner Brothers wanted a horror thriller they could market to the masses. That creative clash doomed the film from the start. The production design is cold and clinical, all white rooms and sterile hospital corridors. Cinematographer Richard Klein shot it in a deliberately flat style that makes everything feel detached and uncomfortable. It's effective, but not exactly crowd-pleasing. The brain surgery sequences are graphic and realistic enough that some theaters received complaints from squeamish viewers. The movie cost roughly $2 million to make, which wasn't excessive, but it barely recouped that at the box office. Warner Brothers gave it a limited release and basically left it to die. Critics were mixed. Some praised its intelligence and restraint. Others called it boring and cold, which honestly it kind of is. Crichton himself later admitted the film had problems. He said he was too close to the material and should have let someone else direct it. The pacing drags in places and the ending feels abrupt and unsatisfying. But buried in there is a genuinely prescient warning about the dangers of brain-computer interfaces that feels more relevant now than ever. The Terminal Man vanished after its brief theatrical run. It barely made it to home video and took years to get a proper DVD release. Even Crichton fans tend to overlook it in favor of his more successful adaptations. It's a shame because there's real craft here, real ideas worth exploring. It just needed tighter execution. Number 8, Idaho Transfer. Peter Fonda produced and directed this ultra-low-budget time travel film, and it's exactly as weird as that sounds. The story involves a group of young people using a time travel device to jump 56 years into the future. When they arrive, they discover that humanity has been wiped out by an ecological disaster. They're stuck, and they have to figure out how to survive in this dead world. The entire film was shot in Idaho on a shoestring budget of around $200,000. Fonda cast mostly unknowns, people who had little to no acting experience. That rawness works in the film's favor, though. It gives everything this documentary-style authenticity that a polished Hollywood production could never achieve. The landscapes are barren and haunting, and Fonda lets long shots of empty deserts speak louder than dialogue ever could. The time travel device itself is brilliantly simple, just a chair inside a government facility. No flashy effects, no elaborate set pieces. People sit down, close their eyes, and when they open them, they're in the future. It's economical filmmaking at its finest, working within limitations to create something genuinely eerie. The film has almost no plot in the traditional sense. Characters wander, argue, die, and disappear. There's no clear hero, no triumphant ending, just young people slowly realizing they're watching humanity's final chapter play out in real time. It's bleak, deliberately paced, and completely uncommercial. Critics who actually saw it were baffled. Most audiences never got the chance because the film received almost no theatrical distribution. It played a handful of cities, got terrible word of mouth, and vanished. Fonda's reputation as an actor kept him working, but this directing effort pretty much killed any future he had behind the camera for years. The environmental themes hit differently now. Back in 1973, ecological disaster felt like distant science fiction. Today it feels like a documentary from the near future. That prescience gives Idaho Transfer a relevance it never had during its original release. Tracking down a copy used to be nearly impossible. It wasn't on VHS, wasn't on DVD for decades. Only hardcore Fonda completists and cult film fanatics even knew it existed. Eventually, it got a small Blu-ray release, but even that didn't generate much attention. It remains one of the most obscure science fiction films of the decade, which is exactly the kind of forgotten gem that deserves rediscovery. Number 7. Zardoz. John Boorman followed up Deliverance, one of the most intense thrillers ever made, with Zardoz, one of the most baffling science fiction films ever made. And yeah, this is the one where Sean Connery wears a red diaper and thigh-high boots for the entire movie. That image alone has kept this film alive in the cultural memory, but mostly as a punchline. The story is set in the year 2293. Humanity is divided into two groups: the Brutals, who live in the wasteland and worship a giant flying stonehead called Zardoz, and the Eternals, an immortal elite who live in a protective dome called the Vortex. Connery plays Zed, a brutal who sneaks inside the Vortex and disrupts their perfect society. The themes are actually ambitious. Boorman wanted to explore class warfare, the dangers of immortality, sexual repression, and the cyclical nature of civilization. The problem is, he wrapped all those ideas in such bizarre visuals and convoluted plotting that audiences had no idea what they were watching. The flying stonehead vomits guns while screaming about how the gun is good and the phallus is evil. It's a lot. Connery signed on because he wanted to break free from James Bond typecasting. He was desperate to prove he could do something weird and artistic. Well, he succeeded. Zardoz is definitely weird. Whether it's artistic is still up for debate 50 years later. Connery himself later admitted he didn't fully understand the script, but trusted Boorman's vision. The budget was around $1.57 million, most of it going toward building the elaborate sets for the Vortex. Boorman shot the whole thing in Ireland, using the Irish landscape to create this haunting post-apocalyptic world. Visually, the film is stunning. Narratively, it's a mess. It bombed at the box office, pulling in just under $2 million worldwide. Critics were brutal. Roger Ebert gave it 1 star and called it a genuinely quirky movie, a trip into a future that seems ruled by perpetually stoned set decorators. Audiences stayed away in droves. The few who did see it walked out confused, angry, or laughing. Over time, though, Zardoz found its people. Cult film enthusiasts embraced its weirdness. Film students studied it as an example of a director's unfettered vision, going completely off the rails. It's required viewing for anyone interested in 70s cinema, precisely because it's so uncompromisingly bizarre. Number 6. A Boy and His Dog. OLQ. Jones directed this post-apocalyptic black comedy based on Harlan Ellison's novella, and it's one of the darkest science fiction films of the decade. Don Johnson stars as Vic, a teenage scavenger wandering a nuclear wasteland with his telepathic dog, Blood. They communicate through thought, and Blood is significantly smarter than Vic, which becomes a running joke throughout the film. The first half plays like a grim survival story. Vic and Blood search for food and women in the bombed-out remains of 2024. The wasteland is brutal, lawless, and filled with violent gangs. The tone is pitch black, and the film doesn't shy away from showing just how ugly this world really is. Vic is not a hero. He's a selfish, horny teenager who treats women like objects and only cares about his next meal or his next conquest. Then the film takes a hard turn. Vic gets lured underground by a woman named Quila June into a bizarre subterranean society that's trying to recreate small-town America. Although they've got white picket fences, town committees, and a disturbing secret, they're all sterile and need Vic for breeding purposes. It's satire, but it's vicious satire that doesn't let anyone off easy. The ending is infamous. It's so dark that even Harlan Ellison, who wrote the original story, was shocked. Jones pushed it further than the novella ever did, and the final line has become legendary among cult film fans. It's funny, horrifying, and unforgettable all at once. The film cost around $400,000 and somehow managed to make back around $3 million. That might sound like a success, but distributors were so uncomfortable with the film's violence and misogyny that it barely got a wide release. It played drive-ins and grindhouses, places where audiences expected something sleazy and provocative. Don Johnson was 24 years old when he made this, years before Miami Vice turned him into a household name. He's genuinely good in it, playing Vic as a feral survivor with just enough charm to keep you from completely hating him. The dog, Tiger, who played Blood, deserves credit too. His performance is key to making the telepathic relationship believable. A boy and his dog have aged in complicated ways. The misogyny that was played for dark laughs in 1975 lands very differently now. but as a snapshot of 70s cynicism and post-Vietnam disillusionment, it's fascinating. This film could only have been made in that specific moment. Number 5. Phase 4. Saul Bass, the legendary graphic designer who created iconic movie posters and title sequences for Hitchcock, Kubrick, and Scorsese, only directed one feature film in his entire career. Phase 4 was it, and it's a genuinely unsettling piece of science fiction that almost nobody saw. The premise is simple, but creepy. After a cosmic event, ants in the Arizona desert suddenly develop collective intelligence. They start building strange geometric structures and attacking anything that threatens them. 2 scientists and a local girl hole up in a high-tech research station to study the ants and figure out what they're planning. The ants, meanwhile, lay siege to the station. Bass approached this like a nature documentary crossed with a horror film. He hired a real entomologist and filmed actual ants performing the behaviors shown in the movie. No miniatures, no fake insects. Every ant you see on screen is real, and Bass shot them with macro photography that makes them look absolutely alien. The close-ups are incredible and deeply uncomfortable. You can see every mandible, every antenna, every coordinated movement. The human characters are almost secondary to the ants. Nigel Davenport and Michael Murphy play the scientists, and Lynn Frederick plays the girl they rescue. The acting is fine, but the real stars are the insects. Bass understood that. He gives the ants long sequences where they communicate, build, and strategize. And it's genuinely eerie watching them work with purpose and intelligence. The film's biggest problem was the ending. Bass shot a wild, psychedelic finale that showed humanity evolving into a new form of consciousness alongside the ants. Paramount hated it. They cut it completely and tacked on a more conventional ending. That original footage was considered lost for decades until it was rediscovered and included in a special edition release. Phase 4 cost around $1 million and made almost nothing at the box office. Paramount barely promoted it, dumped it into theaters, and moved on. Critics were mixed. Some praised its visual ambition, others found it slow and pretentious. Audiences expecting a creature feature were disappointed by the deliberate pacing and cerebral approach. Bass never directed another film. He went back to design work, creating more iconic posters and sequences. But Phase 4 remains this fascinating oddity, a science fiction film that prioritizes atmosphere and ideas over action and spectacle. It's a slow burn that rewards patient viewers willing to meet it on its own strange terms. Number 4. Sleeper. Woody Allen made a science fiction comedy in 1973, and somehow, it's the one film in his entire catalog that people forget exists. Sleeper is pure slapstick, wrapped in dystopian satire, and it's genuinely funny in ways that hold up 50 years later. Allen plays Miles Monroe, a health food store owner who goes in for routine surgery in 1973 and wakes up 200 years later in a totalitarian future. The setup is classic fish-out-of-water comedy, but Allen commits fully to the science fiction elements. The future world is meticulously designed, all white curves and sterile architecture that looks like what people in the 70s thought the future would be. There are robots, cloning machines, and a device called the Orgasmatron that does exactly what you think it does. Allen and co-writer Marshall Brickman loaded the script with sight gags and physical comedy that wouldn't feel out of place in a Buster Keaton film. Diane Keaton plays Luna, a poet in this future society who gets dragged into Miles's attempts to avoid capture by the authoritarian government. Their chemistry is fantastic, and Keaton holds her own in the physical comedy sequences. There's a scene where Allen disguises himself as a robot butler and serves dinner at a fancy party. It's perfectly executed slapstick that builds and builds until it collapses into chaos. The film costs roughly $2 million, which was modest even for 1973. Allen shot it quickly and efficiently, using practical effects and clever camera tricks instead of expensive special effects. The giant vegetables that show up in one sequence, a 200-pound banana and a massive chicken, were just props built to scale and filmed to look even bigger. United Artists released Sleeper in December 1973, and it made roughly $18 million at the box office. That's a solid hit, especially for a comedy. Critics loved it too. Roger Ebert gave it 4 stars and called it the closest Allen has come to making a perfect film. Audiences responded to the physical comedy and the absurdist humor in ways they hadn't with Allen's earlier, more experimental work. Despite that success, Sleeper gets weirdly overlooked when people discuss Woody Allen's career. Everyone remembers Annie Hall, Manhattan, and Hannah and Her Sisters. Sleeper just doesn't come up in conversation the same way. Maybe it's because it's so different from his later character-driven dramas. Maybe it's because science fiction comedies were never taken seriously by awards bodies. Whatever the reason, it deserves better. The film holds up remarkably well. The political satire about conformity and authoritarianism still resonates. The jokes about health food and technology feel prescient in weird ways. And Allen's physical comedy is genuinely impressive. He trained for weeks to get the slapstick right, studying silent film comedians and practicing pratfalls until he could execute them flawlessly. Sleeper is proof that Woody Allen could do broad comedy just as well as he could do neurotic relationship dramas. It's funny, smart, beautifully shot, and completely entertaining from start to finish. The fact that it's been largely forgotten is baffling. This should be required viewing for anyone interested in science fiction comedy or Allen's filmography. Number 3. Dark Star. John Carpenter's directorial debut started as a student film at USC and somehow got expanded into a feature that cost $60,000 and launched 2 major careers. Dark Star is a low-budget science fiction comedy about 4 astronauts stuck on a ship for 20 years, traveling through deep space and blowing up unstable planets. The crew is bored, depressed, and slowly losing their minds. One of them is literally dead, but kept semi-alive in cryogenic suspension, so the others can talk to him. The tone is pure existential dread, played for laughs. These guys aren't brave explorers or heroic space cowboys. They're blue-collar workers stuck in a dead-end job millions of miles from home. The ship is falling apart, the onboard computer is malfunctioning, and their primary antagonist is a beach ball painted to look like an alien that escaped from the cargo hold. That alien, by the way, is one of the most ridiculous creatures ever put on film. It's clearly just a beach ball with claws glued on, but Carpenter and his co-writer Dan O'Bannon committed to the bit so hard that it somehow works. There's an extended sequence where one of the crew members chases it through the ship's ventilation system, and it's both hilarious and surprisingly tense. O'Bannon, who later wrote Alien, plays one of the astronauts and also handled most of the special effects. The models and miniatures were built in Carpenter's apartment using household materials and spare parts. The spaceship is made from paper towel rolls, plastic bottles, and whatever else they could scrounge up. It looks cheap, but there's a charm to the DIY aesthetic that works in the film's favor. The movie's most famous sequence involves an astronaut trying to convince a sentient bomb not to detonate by engaging it in a philosophical debate about phenomenology. It's absurd and brilliant, and it perfectly captures the film's weird mix of smart science fiction ideas and goofy humor. The bomb eventually decides to embrace existentialism and detonates anyway, because why not? Dark Star had a limited theatrical release in 1974 and made almost no money. Critics ignored it. Audiences who stumbled across it in grindhouses had no idea what to make of it. Was it a comedy, a serious science fiction film, a parody? The answer is all of the above, and that confuses people. Carpenter used the film as a calling card to get bigger projects. He showed it to producers and said, "Look what I can do with no money and no resources." It worked. Within a few years, he was making Halloween, and his career took off. O'Bannon went on to write Alien, Total Recall, and a bunch of other major science fiction films. Dark Star developed a cult following over the decades. Home video gave it a second life, and people started recognizing it as a genuinely unique piece of filmmaking. It's sloppy, cheap, and weird, but it's also inventive, funny, and surprisingly thoughtful about isolation and meaninglessness. For a $60,000 student film, it punches way above its weight. Number 2. The Man Who Fell to Earth. Nicholas Roeg directed this adaptation of Walter Tevis's novel, and it remains one of the strangest, most hypnotic science fiction films ever made. David Bowie plays Thomas Jerome Newton, an alien who comes to Earth searching for water to save his dying planet. He uses advanced technology to build a business empire, amasses a fortune, and then everything slowly falls apart as he becomes corrupted by human vices. Casting Bowie was a stroke of genius. He doesn't have to act like an alien. He just has to be himself, this otherworldly figure who already seemed like he came from another planet. Rogue lets the camera linger on Bowie's face, those unsettling eyes, that angular bone structure. Even when Newton is dressed in normal clothes and trying to blend in, he radiates strangeness. The film's structure is deliberately fragmented. Scenes don't always connect in obvious ways. Time jumps forward without warning. Rogue uses jarring edits, split screens, and layered imagery to create this disorienting experience that mirrors Newton's fractured perception of Earth. Some viewers find it pretentious. Others find it mesmerizing. There's no middle ground. The production was troubled from the start. The studio, British Lion Films, gave Roeg creative freedom, but not much money. The budget was around $1.5 million, which sounds like a lot until you realize they were shooting across multiple countries with elaborate makeup effects and futuristic set designs. Rogue stretched every dollar as far as it would go. Bowie was deep in his cocaine addiction during filming. Rogue later said, "Bowie barely ate, rarely slept, and lived off milk and peppers. That gaunt, haunted look Newton has throughout the film isn't acting. That's just Bowie in 1975. He was so far gone that he couldn't remember making large portions of the movie." Years later, he admitted he watched it and had no recollection of filming entire scenes. The film premiered in March 1976 and immediately divided audiences. British critics were respectful but puzzled. American critics were harsher. The movie was too slow, too weird, too art house for mainstream audiences. It made roughly $100,000 in its initial US release, an absolute disaster considering the budget. Then something strange happened. The film found its audience on college campuses and midnight movie circuits. People started seeing it multiple times, unpacking its layers, debating its meaning. Bowie's music fans sought it out. Science fiction enthusiasts recognized it as something genuinely different from the Star Wars-style space opera that was about to dominate the genre. The Man Who Fell to Earth is a film about alienation, addiction, and the corrupting influence of capitalism. It's also a film about an actual alien, and Rogue never lets you forget that duality. Every scene operates on multiple levels, blending the literal and the metaphorical until they're inseparable. It's not an easy watch. It demands patience and attention, but it's also one of the most visually stunning and thematically rich science fiction films ever made. Roeg and Bowie created something that still feels ahead of its time. Number 1. Solaris. Andrei Tarkovsky's Solaris is not just a forgotten 70s sci-fi classic. It's one of the greatest science fiction films ever made, period. It came out the same year as The Godfather, and yet most people in the West had no idea it even existed. The Soviet Union released it in 1972, but it took years to get proper distribution outside of Eastern Europe and film festivals. The story is based on Stanislaw Lem's novel about a psychologist named Chris Kelvin, sent to a space station orbiting the planet Solaris. The ocean covering Solaris is sentient, and it's been psychologically tormenting the remaining crew by manifesting physical copies of people from their memories and guilt-ridden pasts. When Kelvin arrives, the ocean creates a copy of his dead wife, and he's forced to confront his grief and his failures. Tarkovsky wasn't interested in making a traditional science fiction film. He hated most sci-fi, called it shallow and obsessed with technology. He wanted to use the genre to explore deeply human questions about memory, love, consciousness, and what it means to be alive. The result is a film that moves at a glacial pace, almost 3 hours long, with extended sequences of characters just sitting in silence thinking. The space station itself looks nothing like the sleek, futuristic sets you'd see in American or British sci-fi. It's grimy, cluttered, falling apart. There are papers scattered everywhere, water dripping from the ceiling, dust on every surface. Tarkovsky wanted it to feel lived in and real, not like a sterile movie set. The production took over a year. Tarkovsky clashed constantly with Soviet authorities, who wanted him to make something more accessible and ideologically clear. He refused to compromise, and the final cut is exactly the film he wanted to make. The cinematography by Vadim Yusov is stunning, using long takes and slow camera movements that force you to sit with the characters' emotions. Solaris premiered in the Soviet Union in February 1972 and won the Grand Prix at the Cannes Film Festival that same year. Western critics who saw it were blown away. It became the Soviet answer to 2001, A Space Odyssey. Though Tarkovsky resented the comparison, he thought Kubrick's film was cold and detached. His film, he insisted, was warm and deeply human. The film barely played in American theaters. A few art houses showed it, mostly to small crowds of film students and serious cinephiles. It wasn't dubbed or subtitled properly for years. The copies that circulated were often poor quality bootlegs or festival prints. Most Americans never had a chance to see it until home video decades later. Stanislaw Lem, who wrote the original novel, hated the film. He thought Tarkovsky ignored the science fiction elements and turned his philosophical novel into a maudlin romance. Tarkovsky didn't care. He made the film he wanted to make, and it stands as one of the most profound explorations of human consciousness ever put on screen. Solaris is challenging, slow, and demands your full attention. But if you meet it on its own terms, it's devastating. It's a film about grief that understands grief, about memory that understands how memory works, about love that doesn't sentimentalize or simplify. It's science fiction at its absolute best. The 70s gave us some of the most ambitious, weird, and unforgettable science fiction ever made. These films didn't play it safe. They took risks, challenged audiences, and paid the price with poor box office and faded memories. But they deserve better then, and they deserve to be remembered now.